morning, everyone. As I was sitting and paying recognition to those who passed, I realized that one thing about the Multicultural Summit is I think that we do a wonderful job of acknowledging and embracing community, recognizing life contribution of our elders, as we did last night, and those who are no longer with us, as we've done this morning. Another way that we pay homage to the life contributions of those within our multicultural family is through our keynote speakers. And so I have the honor and privilege today to introduce our featured speaker, Phyllis Randolph Frye. She's currently a senior partner of the Frye, Stanley, Oaks, and Benavides firm here based in Houston. I'll give you a little bit of background of her education that took her to this place that she is today. She has a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Texas A&M University. She has a Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Texas A&M University, a Master's of Business Administration from the University of Houston, one of our sponsors, and a Doctorate of Jurisprudence from the University of Houston as well. In terms of her legal background, she was other parts of her background, in terms of appointments, admissions, licenses, and time in the military. She's an honorable discharge from the U.S. Army. She's a licensed professional engineer. She's licensed to practice law here in Texas. She was admitted to the Supreme Court of the United States of America in 2000, admitted to the United States District Court, Southern District of Texas in 2004, admitted to the United States Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims 2012, as well as appointed as Associate Municipal Court Judge for the City of Houston as of 2010. Phyllis Randolph Frye is an Eagle Scout, a former member of the Texas A&M Corps of Cadets, a U.S. Army veteran, a licensed engineer, a licensed attorney, a father, a grandmother, and a lesbian wife. She is the first out transgender judge in the nation. And when I read about her, oh yes, that's And being the academic nerd of psychologist that I am, when I read about these different degrees in engineering and business administration, and now being a lawyer, and myself once being a pseudo-engineer, because I studied architecture engineering for 5 years before I moved over to psychology, I thought to myself, what a beautiful mind she must possess. Based on her educational life experience and relationships that she's had throughout her years, it suggests to me that she has a complexity and intersectionality of perspectives, principles, politics, policies, and practices, as well as personhoods in terms of what it means in terms of being a multicultural person in our society. Now, having lived over 60% of her life as a woman she always felt herself to be, Phyllis remains on the cutting edge of LGBT IQ and especially transgender legal and political issues. When the gay community was still ignoring and marginalizing the transgender community, Phyllis began the national transgender legal and political movement. Thus, she is known as being its grandmother. With the 6th annual Transgender Law Conferences and their grassroots training in the early 1990s. Judge Frye is a winner of the Lavender Law's highest honor, the Dan Bradley Award of 2001. She was honored by Texas A&M University beginning in 2009 with an annual diversity award given in her name. And I think that's outstanding because a number of us have been talking about being here in this wonderful host state of Texas and city of Houston, but recognizing sometimes the policy and politics of LGBT identities is not fully embraced in the state of Texas. So it's wonderful that we have an advocate such as Judge Frye to advance those issues on our behalf here in Houston, Texas, and throughout the nation. Finally, in 2010, Phyllis was sworn in as the first out transgender judge in the nation as a City of Houston Associate Municipal Judge. She retains her senior partnership of Frye, Stanley, Oaks, and Fedez, which is an LGBTIQ and straight allies law firm. Without further ado, I present to you Phyllis Randolph Frye.
What a gracious introduction. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I'm probably going to start talking fast because I have a lot to cover. I've brought many tools for you to use. Luckily, a lot of them are on the Summit's website as I speak. Others I have brought to the organizers in digital form, and I've been told they will be placed soon. And I also hope the organizers, after I give this keynote, will put the PowerPoint up also, because I think that it'll give you some other tools that you can use. How many of you were here to hear former Surgeon General Elder speak yesterday? Most of you? I came up and I met her and I said, "How am I supposed to follow you?" And she gave me permission to use some of her nuggets. The one that really struck me is dealing with the fact that I'm gray-haired, and soon I'm going to be 65, and in 2 weeks I'm going to be eligible for Medicare. And of course she said that we were not aging, we were saging. And I'm going to steal that from her every chance I get. Many of the things that I've brought you are things that I have written over the past decades. And one is the article that's on your screen right now. And it refers to the International Bill of Gender Rights. During the many law conferences, transgender law conferences that I hosted in the early 1990s, one of the things that we did was develop the International Bill of Gender Rights. And it took us 4 years to get it in its final form. And I want to tell you, and I hope that you read it and consider the fact that it really, in its final form, has very little to do with transgender rights as much as it has to do with gender rights, both female gender rights and male gender rights, and everything in between. And I'm hoping that advocates like you will reawaken the academic world to this document and use it to promote gender rights, especially in other nations and other continents where women and girls don't have any rights. I think it speaks to them, and I'm glad that we did that. One of the things in this article you'll see is it addresses which restrooms people use, and there are a lot of tools in that paper that you can use whenever your transgender client is transitioning, especially when they're transitioning on the job. Of course, in the last 13 years since I wrote that, thanks to the Americans with Disability Act and any new construction or remodeling that goes on, there are a lot of what we call one-holers. And though they be marked male or female, quite frequently a transgendered person who doesn't pass very well can go into and lock the door to whichever one of those they need to. And I was told yesterday in a workshop day before, Laura Dickey, one of your presenters, informed us that there is an app that costs only 99 cents that people can put on their computers and find gender-neutral restrooms. And they can also add, if they find some that aren't currently on the app. One of the things you will find on the website is an article I wrote in a presentation to the school law section of the State Bar of Texas, in a presentation I made in 2010. And it goes further into the restroom issue, because it came to me in dealing with that issue that most men don't really know that the women's restroom is different, and most women don't really know that the men's restroom is different. I had the privilege, if you'll call it, of using both. And I can tell you that the expectation of privacy is different. When you walk into the men's restroom, and the expectation of privacy is usually almost immediately gone because of the stand-up urinal. And so the expectation of privacy, as soon as you leave the hallway and walk into the men's restroom, there is none. But when you walk into the women's restroom, you have not violated any expectation of privacy. Now, I will tell you that a lot of women would be uncomfortable if a man walked into the women's restroom, but you have not invaded any expectation of privacy, because any women's restroom that is maintained well has lockable stalls. That's where the expectation of privacy is. And I address it in detail in the paper that's on your website dealing with schools, and I suggest that you use it whenever you are advocating for your client at the workplace. On employment issues, the paper, the International Bill of Gender Rights, the one that's on your screen right now, it addresses the very sad history of employment rights for transgenders, because we really didn't have any employment rights until the first decade of this century. We began to win in the courts, and I must say proudly that the strategy that I suggested in this paper was used by quite a few attorneys in the fights during this last decade to get transgender employment rights. And I will also tell you that earlier this year, in the spring, the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission began to adopt rules that extended Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which prohibited discrimination in employment based on sex, to LGBT people. And so anytime you have a client who even thinks that there might be an employment issue, the first thing you need to do is advise them to purchase an hour of time from an employment lawyer in their jurisdiction. Sometimes you're covered by state law. In Texas, we go to the federal courts. In a lot of other states, we go to the federal courts. But the best thing that you can do is have your person sit down in front of an employment lawyer to find out what their rights are, what their rights are not, find out if their situation is covered by the EEOC, because sometimes the firms are too small to be covered by the EEOC. And also to advise the person what to listen for, what to watch for, what documents to bring home now, so that if they are fired and prevented from cleaning out their file cabinet, they already have it home and ready to use. Now, sometimes people say, well, how do I find a lawyer in my jurisdiction outside of Texas? Because obviously, if it's a Texas situation, you're going to contact my firm. Something that I failed to put on your website, but is available if you will go to tglegal.com. And all you got to do is Google my name and you'll eventually find tglegal.com. It's an older website, but on there is an article called the Non-Lawyer Checklist. And it will give you and it will give your client advice on how to find a friendly lawyer in the area that you need. As far as, let me see, I got a little ahead of me. Oh yes, another article that is available is responsible representation of your first transgendered client. Now this was written for attorneys, but I believe that you will find it very helpful because it has a lot of stuff to advise you if this is your first ever transgender client. The rules for an attorney are the same for you. How do you address the client? How do you give courtesy to the client? How do you advise your staff to deal with the client? And so there are things of that nature that you want to deal with. Quickly, I will say that in that article you'll find a little bit about insurance. I can't wait for Obamacare to really kick in. I purposely call it Obamacare because I hope that in the future, as everyone in the country begins to embrace the changes and see how wonderful it's going to make it for everybody, that we give credit to the President who brought that to us. So I'm going to call it Obamacare on purpose. But a lot of times, your clients will ask you, as they ask me, well, when I transition, what do I do about insurance? Is this going to affect my insurance or not? I advise clients that if they are still married, and by the way, transgender people do not have to divorce. That's a popular myth that was going around 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. You do not have to divorce. But if you are on your wife's or your husband's insurance and you want to stay on that insurance and you get your name changed and you get your gender ID changed, go ahead and stay whatever gender you were that gets you the insurance. Who cares? I'm still listed as male on my wife's insurance and I don't care. When I went to the hospital earlier this last year with pneumonia, and by the way, that's something you never want. They paid everything, and I didn't care that it said male. And when I applied for my Medicare card, Social Security still has me as male because we have, unfortunately, in this nation, the Defense of Marriage Act, which the federal government does not recognize same-sex marriages. And so I have remained male because I want to get my Medicare. I want to protect our marriage. And I also, if something happens to her or something happens to me, I want the survivor to get whatever Social Security benefits there are. So for right now, swallow a little pride and don't worry about it. Sometimes one of your clients may be dealing with substance abuse. General Elders talked a lot about that yesterday. And frequently, as a criminal defense lawyer, which I have practiced for the last 30 years, I deal with representing LGBT clients who are arrested and are dealing with the possibility of being convicted for substance abuse. And I can get them a probation, but they have to go through counseling and halfway houses and all this other stuff. And I have found over the years that whenever the courts or the probation people are dealing with trans substance abusers who happen to be going through the criminal justice system, they want them to be treated for their substance abuse, but they are really not interested in that treatment also dealing with the guilt over being trans that is probably a facilitator or a aggravator of the substance abuse. So you need to, if your client is going to go on any type of probation or anything with the court system that deals with substance abuse, you need to ensure that their lawyer and the court also understand that they have to make the fact that the person is trans or LGBT as part of the program. The next article is same-sex marriages have existed legally in the United States for a long time now. That is going to be on your website soon. And it's true that transgender people can remain married. They are not have to divorce. They can divorce, but they do not have to. And any surgeon who says to your client that you have to divorce before you can have transsexual surgery, tell your client to find another surgeon. Chapter 22, Facing Discrimination, Organizing for Freedom. I had fun writing this, and it's on your Summit website. This is the history of the transgender legal and political movement up through 1999, when it was published as a chapter in a major book called Creating Change, Sexuality, Public Policy, and Civil Rights. This is why I'm called grandmother. I think you'll enjoy reading it. I think your client will learn a lot from it. The next article, which I'm hoping will go on the website, Slavery, Sex, and Gender. It's an interesting read. Essentially, what it says is that whenever society is finally ready, frequently law will follow. As we know, in our very terrible, painful, and dark history, we had the Dred Scott decision in the early 1800s, which was not resolved until we had a very bloody Civil War. I hope y'all have seen the movie Lincoln. We also continued that with Plessy v. Ferguson, which was the separate but equal doctrine, which led to Jim Crow and all of its horrors, and was finally overturned by Brown versus Board of Education and the decades that have followed since then. We also, of course, know that women were not really part of the mix until the successful fight on passage of the 19th Amendment. And we know that people did not have the right to privacy until we had Griswold versus Connecticut, where married heterosexuals could actually get and use condoms without criminal sanction. And of course, that led to many other cases, which led to Roe v. Wade, which is still being fought out in our society and in some of our state legislatures. The whole purpose for that article is to address the reader to the fact that it's now time for gender rights in the LGBT legal arena. Okay. First off, I want to acknowledge and thank you, the American Psychological Association, for having me here. I want to tell you that when I was first asked, I did not realize this was the American Psychological Association, the PhD people. I thought this was the MD people who had done the DSM, and I couldn't wait to stand in front of you and fuss at you for the horrible things you had done to the transgender community for 40 years in the DSM after homosexuality was ruled not to be a mental disease. 40 years it's taken them. But anyway, so I have now fussed at them. I want to thank Division 17, and I want to suggest 2 additions to your ancestors. One is the late Burns DuBose from Bryan College Station, Texas, 40 years ago. Burns is the one who helped me deal with guilt. And wonderful man. I also wish to recognize the late Paul Walker. Paul got his training at Johns Hopkins under Richard Green and John Money. came to Texas, started the gender outreach program in Galveston, later went to San Francisco. Paul was my first psychologist to work and help me after I transitioned. And I also want to recognize, I hope he's here, I don't know if he's here, and he's not late, my friend, Collier Cole from Galveston, who picked up after Paul left and counseled me for another 5 years before I pronounced myself well. And, but Collier and his colleague, Lee Emery, MD psychiatrist, run the Rosenberg Clinic in Galveston and have done so for decades and have brought many transgender people to a very healthy resolution. So I wanted you to know about them, and I wanted to give a shout out to the Counseling Psychology Division. As to the Society of Psychology for Women, I just wanted you to know that in November of 1977, I was privileged to be a volunteer at the National Women's Summit, and I learned my feminism at the knee of Bella Abzug and Betty Friedan and Gloria Steinem. I met them. That was neat. I think you already know, Division 44, how I feel about the LGBT division. I'm going to skip to Division 45 and relate a story dealing with the study of ethnic minority issues. You may already know this, but maybe it just hasn't reached your consciousness. But when I started practicing law at the Harris County Courthouse, obviously I was the only out transgendered person. This was in the mid-1980s, and I was something of a curiosity. And due to many things that'll take too long to explain, I began to receive appointments from some of the criminal law judges to represent indigent clients. And at that time, the basement of the criminal courthouse was a cafeteria, which was really the training ground for a lot of criminal defense attorneys. We would get there before court and we would visit and meet. No, I got a case on this. Do you know about this? Oh, I'm fixing to get this piece of evidence in this hearing. Do you know about this? There was a whole lot of stuff going on. And at first, whenever I would sit down at the table, I was the last one to sit down at that table. And usually within about 10 minutes, that table was empty. Those were all my white colleagues. But when I sat down at a table that was mostly black, nobody got up, and I was treated very courteously, and other black lawyers sat down. And so early in my professional career, I began to find a home with the African American defense lawyers at the Harris County Criminal Courthouse. And after a while, one of them told me, "Don't you know why we have no problem with you?" And I said, "Well, you're very courteous, but I don't know what you're trying to tell me." And they said, "Well, you know, with us, we have education, we have speaking skills, we have degrees, we have clients, but we are seen first by our external appearance. You have degrees, you have experience, you are graded initially by your outward appearance. And so we know what you're going through. And once people know us and once people know you, you will be accepted. But by and large, any person of color knows that when they go into a white audience, it doesn't matter what's between their ears. It doesn't matter what shingles they carry. They are judged first by their outward appearance. Thus it is with a transgender person who is in the beginning of their transition and they don't pass. So thank you, Division 45. Now that's a beautiful girl. And that's the best evidence that sex is between your ears and not between your legs. because that's me. I'm going to pause here because I need to talk about transgender youth. As I was preparing, I left something out, and as I was listening to some of the speakers, I realized, oh my goodness, I'd forgotten that. So I'm already running short on time, so I'm going to race through what I'm going to say. Transgendered youth. In Texas, and of course, those of you who aren't from Texas, you're going to have to find a lawyer in your own state. But I want you to know this is possible. In Texas, I take minors through the courts and get their names legally changed and get their gender ID legally changed. So when their parents, who heretofore have had problems with a school, show up with a court order from a state district court saying, this is the legal name that's going on the record and this is the gender that's going on the record, guess what? A lot of problems disappear. And the other thing that you need to remember is that if a school problem continues, quit fooling with the principal. Because the principal probably is a jock. You need to advise your client to hire a lawyer, not to litigate. These cases we don't want in the courts because there's a good chance we'll get in front of a conservative judge and lose and make bad law. But you need a lawyer so that the lawyer can contact the school district lawyer. The school district lawyer usually has a different perspective than the jock principal does. And usually you can get sense talked into the school district that way. Finally, later on, there's going to be something about teen shelters and housing. I'm going to mention it right now. I was appointed to represent a delinquent child who was transgendered and in the care of the Texas Family Protective Services. And luckily, I ended up getting a very good deputy who works for the department who really cared. And between us, and it was mostly her, she searched and searched and searched all over Texas and found 2 other counselors in Texas and other areas who were also dealing with transgender youth. And in all of these cases, they were having problems placing them in a contractor home because where do you put the kid? In the male dormitory and the female dormitory. But guess what? When you got 3, you can bring them all to the same place and put them in their own room. And so you need to keep pushing, and you need to keep pushing. And when you're finished, then you need to push some more. Okay, very quickly, Eagle Scout. I consider myself to be one of the great actresses of the world. Because I was really good at being a guy. I didn't become Phyllis because I couldn't make it as a guy. Texas A&M Corps Cadets. Senior boots and all, baby. I had the privilege of doing the Donahue Show in 1989, and it was a show on being disowned by families. Just to say that I have been, and it never has changed. Too bad for them. This is me addressing the second Transgender Lobby Day in Washington, D.C. in 1995. The first was an assemblage of 6 of us, and we realized we could do it, and we got together. And in October of 1995, this was the result, and there has been a lobbying presence in Washington, D.C. every year, currently headed by the National Center for Transgender Equality, headed by Mara Kiesling. Shout out to Mara. Google the National Center for Transgender Equality. Have your clients Google them, support them. They do good work. They're the ones who teamed up with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and the State Department to get the State Department to change the rules on passports so that you can get your gender ID changed on your passport with a doctor's letter before and without ever having to have a requirement of surgery. And that's the judge. Now, as I said, I hope this makes it to the website, because you need to show these pictures to your clients. You need to show them what they can be. This is 2013. This is not 1972 when the military ran me out. This is not 1972 when my first wife divorced me and took my child. This is not 1976 when the engineering community said my licenses and my degrees could go away because they were going to blackball me because I had transitioned as a woman and I was just too queer for them. This is 2013. So, use me. All right, here's what I came to talk to you about. First off, I want to give you a new word. Genital corrective surgery, not genital reassignment surgery. Genital reassignment surgery says that we are going from one to another. Gender corrective surgery means we are going to where we belonged in the first place. And it is an assertion. But I also want to tell you that surgery is not the initial goal, should not be the initial goal, even though all of your clients will come to you and they'll say, I'm ready for surgery. Well, they may be ready for surgery, but a lot has to happen first. And they need to come to the realization that if they want to have surgery, that's cool. I'm not here to block surgery. I'm not here to say surgery is bad. But I am here to say that most transgenders, when it's all over with and they finally found their comfort level, don't have surgery. Let the hormones do what they do. I've never had facial surgery, although I must admit some people really do need facial surgery. I've never had breast implants. If your MTFs wonder what's going to happen with the hormones, tell them to look at their mother and sister and grandmother. That's what they're going to be. If they were flat, they're going to be flat. Also, if they have breast cancer in the family, they might want to think about that too. Okay, is genital corrective surgery always necessary? No. I never had all of it myself. My wife and I, she said she would stay with me if I stopped short of surgery. And this was back in, I don't know, 37 years ago, because this summer will be our 40th anniversary. And I transitioned during our third year and went full time. And I said to myself, do you mean that I can be Phyllis, that I can live as Phyllis, that I can take hormones, I can get my name changed, I can live, and all I have to do is stop short of surgery, and I get to keep this wonderful person beside me for the rest of my life? Sounds like a bargain to me. So I did. And then in 1995, again, the story's too long, but she said that she felt that I had fulfilled my bargain and that I was getting older, and as you get older, surgery it becomes more of a risk. And she said, if you want to have surgery, I'll stay with you. So suddenly I had the green light. And I thought about it a long time. And, you know, it was no big deal for me at that time. And again, I'm talking about me personally. I'm not talking about your client. Your client may really need surgery. I determined that I didn't. I had an orchiectomy. If you don't know what that is, well, look it up. But the main thing is I got rid of the infusion of testosterone, that my hormones that I was taking were constantly fighting with. And it was a wonderful experience. And that's all I've ever had. And this is not a revelation. I've never made a secret about it. I'm not flying under any radar. but I'm a representative of the transgender community. Female to male surgery, bottom surgery especially, is very difficult, very unsatisfactory, extremely expensive, and most FTMs that I know of usually don't get it because once they've had top surgery, once they've had a hysterectomy and they are on male hormones, usually there's sufficient stimulation and also they can get a surgery that releases the clitoris. They can also have scrotal implants to where they're happy with the way they are. So you want to advise your client that they need to let the hormones do their thing and take a little time to get used to who they are. If they need facial surgery, you know, get facial surgery if you can afford it. And also, I wanted to say that a professional opinion is that it's an opinion. So just because, I know y'all are all PhD nerds, but just because you can't find the right thing to back up the fact that you want to opine that this person is really a man instead of a woman, or this person is really a woman instead of a man, well, say it. Go ahead and say it. It won't hurt anything. Legal change of names should be done at the beginning. When I first started practicing law and taking people through the courts back in the mid-'80s, the judges, I ran into stiff opposition because they didn't know anything about us. And they said, we're not going to even change your name until after you've had all of your surgery. Now, knowing that you have to have a real life experience of, then it was 2 years and some is 3 and now it can be as little as 1. How in the world are you supposed to get or keep a job if you can't even get your name changed? If you're appearing as Susan and your name is Ralph on your ID, or you're appearing as Frank and your name is Melissa on your ID, how are you supposed to get a job? And so I advise and I do legal name changes at the very beginning. I also get the gender ID on the driver's license corrected from M to F or from F to M at the beginning without any need of any surgery. Now, this is not an amendment of the birth certificate. This is an amendment of the driver's license. That's what you throw out every day whenever you're applying for a job or anything of that sort. Okay, I already talked about talking to an employment lawyer about getting or keeping a job, and I've already talked about no one can force a transgender couple to divorce. And I've already talked about the criminal justice, this article right here, that's the responsible representation article. And a lot of what happens to transgenders in prison is what happens to transgender elderly in nursing homes. And this is the crux of my talk. Transgender community is becoming elderly. We are going to be going into nursing homes. If the nursing homes don't change, I can assure you that if my wife dies first, I will kill myself before I'll go to a nursing home and let them do to me what they can currently do and I see done to other transgender people in the nursing homes. Even friendly nursing homes. I learned a word from y'all, microaggressions. All those little things, okay? It's when a person, transgender person, goes in and what's above the neck doesn't match what's below the neck. Institutions currently segregating by gender appearance. I want you to know where it says homeless shelters. Go to the National Gay Lesbian Task Force.org website and you will find guidelines so that you can work in your community to help your homeless shelters deal with transgendered homeless. As far as hospitals, unless you get a private room, even with the private room, I was in the hospital 12 years ago. It's nothing related to being trans or anything of that sort. I was ambulatory. When I went in, I made sure that the front office knew I was trans and I wasn't going to put up with any, pardon me, people who are recording this, shit. And because I was ambulatory, I was able to bathe myself. I was able to toilet myself. Even so, I would have from time to time orderlies or nurses who either belonged on that floor or didn't belong on that floor come and try to convert me to whatever their religious persuasion was. You can imagine which one it was. And tell me how guilty I was and all this other stuff. And I'd press the button and somebody'd come on and I'd say, get this person out of here. So it happens in hospitals. Despite the best intentions, without frequent and adequate training and retraining of each employee, transgender elderly nursing home clients can often be targets of emotional and physical bullying, what y'all call microaggression. This occurs when employees revert to below-the-neck pronouns such as Mr. for a transgendered woman or Miss for a transgendered man, because they're looking under the sheet when they're changing the diaper, when they're putting in the catheter, when they're bathing, instead of looking at the transgendered person above the neck. Okay, female to male, male to female. Some have repressed their inner being most of their lives. They don't need these negatives. Some are full-time hormonal transsexuals like myself, but for a variety of reasons, they have not had all their surgeries. Some are transsexuals with all surgery. They remain frightened. Pepper Sue was a friend of mine. She's passed. That's why I'm using her name. Full surgery, went to the nursing home, and the 2 times that I went to visit her, I could see the terror in her eyes because she was afraid that someone would read me, and if they read me, then they would automatically assume that she was trans, and she was scared of being tormented in the nursing home. What is the gold standard for placing a transgender in a sex-segregated facility? For the female to male trans man, the gold standard is not the penis, but the gold standard is the masculine inner being. Again, what's above the neck. For the male to female trans woman, the gold standard is not the vagina, but it is the feminine inner being above the neck. Things that can assist with respect to before they go to a nursing home: see if you can help them get a legal change of name, see if you can help them get their gender marker changed on their ID, see if you can get their birth certificate amended, see if you can get their passport changed. Running short of time, female to male trans man, this is what you'll encounter above the neck. This is what you'll encounter below the neck. Male to female trans woman, this is what you'll encounter above the neck. Male to female trans woman, this is what you'll encounter below the neck. Catheters and bathing, I already talked about that. But I want y'all to read this when you get this up on your website. Hormones. If you stop the hormones, this is what happens. This is a real danger in prisons. And this is the worksheet that I would appreciate whoever's running the computers leave up while I take question and answers. I'm finished.